I'm the dark storyteller. I'm here to guide you into the realm where dreams and secrets entwine. If my tales help you drift into sleep, show your magic. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me, from what corner of the world are you listening? And what hour does your clock strike? Chapter 1. The Whisper of the Primordial Ocean. Before time, before stars, before breath, there was only ocean, not the kind of ocean you've ever seen, not the blue shimmer of waves beneath a summer sky. This was deeper, older, silent, dark. It stretched forever, in every direction, without surface, without bottom, without name. This was the primordial sea, the womb of everything, the great, breathing nothing from which all would one day emerge. The Babylonians called it Tiamat. She was not a goddess, not at first, not a creature of temples or thunder. She was the salt water of existence itself, timeless, boundless, a mother, yes, but of chaos, not children, a force that existed not to create, but simply to asterisk, and beside her, Apsu, fresh water, still, quiet, the other half, her companion. Together, they floated in the infinite void, coiled within one another, like sleeping serpents. No sun, no wind, no earth, only water, and the gentle pull between them. It was a world of undisturbed calm, a sacred silence, the kind of silence that lives at the bottom of the deepest thought or in the heart of a dream. You can't remember when you wake up. From this union, salt and fresh, Tiamat and Apsu, something unexpected happened. A stirring, a ripple. The first gods were born, tiny lights in the dark, sparks of something new, movement, voice, curiosity. These children, divine, brilliant, full of energy, were nothing like their parents. They whispered, they sang, they explored, they collided, they danced, and they disrupted the stillness. Imagine it, the eternal hush, broken by sound, by joy, by ambition. Tiamat, at first, did not resist. She was vast. What were these little ones compared to her? Like plankton in the sea. But Apsu was troubled. He saw their chaos as threat. Their songs were too loud, their movement too wild. He whispered to Tiamat, "We must end them before they ruin everything." But Tiamat, the great mother of chaos, refused. She was not yet angry, not yet vengeful. These were her children, in a way, the result of her union with Apsu. Life, whether wanted or not, had arrived, and she was not so quick to destroy it. So Apsu planned to do it alone. But the young gods were clever. One among them, Ea, god of wisdom, discovered Apsu's plan. He acted swiftly. In a burst of courage, he struck first. Apsu was killed, and just like that, the silence was shattered. Imagine the ocean now, still dark, still endless, but no longer calm. Tiamat, floating alone, felt a new sensation. Grief. The only being she had known as equal was gone. The other half of her vastness, lost. But the grief did not stay grief for long. It turned, as it often does, into rage. A deep boiling wrath, unlike anything the universe had seen. Tiamat, the quiet mother of salt, began to change. No longer passive, no longer patient. She moved asterisk. Her essence twisted and cracked. Her breath grew hot, and slowly, terribly, she became something new. The dragon, a being of nightmare, colossal, cosmic, uncontainable. She was no longer the silent sea. She was storm, and scale, and fury. Her body spanned stars. Her eyes burned like molten planets. Her voice, thunder wrapped in sorrow. But this was not evil, not madness. This was grief, evolved. This was order, betrayed. This was a mother transformed by loss. And in the belly of the dragon, something else was forming, an army. She would not mourn quietly, she would not drift into myth. She would fight, not for vengeance, exactly, but for the return of what was lost: silence, balance, eternal stillness, to restore the world as it had once been. Before song, before movement, before gods, the ocean had whispered, now it would roar. Chapter 2. The union of salt and fresh. Long before the world had edges, before fire, before sky, before even the idea of day, there were only two essences drifting in a sea of forever: Tiamat, salt water, heavy, ancient, infinite. She was the deep, thick with possibility, unknowable in her silence. And Apsu, fresh water, clear, light, still. He was the flow, the stream beneath the silence, a pulse without beat, no shape, no form, just being. They did not see one another, not in the way we see. They didn't touch, not with hands, or mouths, or eyes, but they felt each other, a presence, a gravity, two eternal forces, circling in the dark. Together, they were the dark. Together, they were everything. For eons, they simply existed, bound by something older than love. Not affection, not desire, but a pull, a merging of opposites, salt and fresh, depth and motion. The tension between them was not war, it was harmony. And from that harmony, something happened, something impossible, creation. In the still black water, a spark, a glimmer, a ripple that would not fade. The first children of the void. They weren't born the way we understand birth. They weren't shaped in wombs or carved by hands. They were emergent, sudden, bright, wild. They sang, they moved, they danced in spirals, spun stories in stars. Tiamat felt them like a vibration deep in her belly, a new kind of being, not like her, not like Apsu. They were curious, they questioned, they created, they brought change. And for the first time, the eternal ocean was not still. The currents began to shift, the water warmed, Apsu stirred. He watched the children with eyes that had never needed to open before. He listened, not to song, but to disturbance, to the crackling of something new, something noisy, in the quiet that had always been. To Apsu, this was wrong, disorder, intrusion. He whispered to Tiamat, they will unravel us. But Tiamat, she did not answer quickly. There was something in their voices, a strange, wild beauty, a flicker of possibility. She felt torn between the silence she had always known and this new glittering storm that called her mother. The gods, her children, multiplied: Ea, Enki, Anshar, Kishar, each with powers, each with dreams, each more daring than the last. They built things, named things, invented time. To Tiamat, it was fascinating. To Apsu, it was unbearable. They kept him from resting. Their energy boiled the stillness. He began to hate them. In secret, he began to plan destruction, a return to peace, a return to silence. But Tiamat still watched, still waited. Somewhere deep inside her, deeper than rage, deeper than instinct, she still remembered the sacred balance, salt and fresh, Tiamat and Apsu. That had once been enough, but now the waters were changing, and soon, very soon, something would shatter. Not yet, not tonight. Tonight, they still float. Tiamat, still listening. Apsu, still sharpening the silence. And above them, the children sing, their voices rising through the endless sea, carving the first breaths of what we will one day call reality. The union had begun something that could never go back, and in the stillness before the storm, the ocean, once again, whispers. Chapter 3. The Birth of the Gods. There was no sky, there was no earth, there was no fire, nor wind, nor sun, only the deep, only the ocean, without end, and in its depths, two forces danced without sound, Tiamat and Apsu, salt and fresh, mother and father of all things, though they themselves had never known what it meant to create. But the stillness could not last forever. From their union came movement, and from that movement something stirred. The waters, once calm, began to pulse with rhythm, the kind of rhythm that suggests a heartbeat, that whispers of life. From the great sea of darkness, light emerged, not light as we know it, not sunlight, not flame, but consciousness, intention, the first spark of will. The gods were born. They came not all at once, but in waves, like breaths, like dreams. The first was Lamu, and then Lamu, spirits of mud and silt, shaping matter from the formless sea. Then Ansha and Kisha, horizon and sky, beginning and continuation. Through them, the universe began to stretch, to widen, to take shape, and with them came Ea, also known as Enki, god of water, wisdom, and hidden things. Clever, quiet, watching, a mind sharp as a blade, soft as a wave. These young gods had power, but they also had curiosity. They did not rest in silence, as their parents had. They moved, they played, they laughed, they created things that had never existed before. Patterns, music, thoughts, intention. The world was changing. Tiamat felt it. She was vast enough to contain it, but she did not understand it. It was as though her body had birthed fire, though she had only ever known water. The children were strange, radiant, filled with energy that disrupted the peace she had always known. But she watched, she listened. It was Apsu who could not bear it. He saw the gods not as children, but as invaders, as noisy, glittering threats to the stillness he loved. Their presence churned the deep. Their laughter echoed where once there had been silence. He spoke of them as infection. He wanted them gone, and yet the gods grew. They built palaces in the deep. They named stars that had never shone. They whispered secrets to each other in the darkness, secrets that even Tiamat could not fully understand. One night, or what passed for night, in a world without time, Apsu came to Tiamat. "We must destroy them," he said. "They bring chaos. They do not belong." But she hesitated. These were her children, her blood, her legacy. Even if she could not recognize herself in them, she could feel their spark. Something ancient within her stirred at the sound of their voices. Apsu grew cold, withdrawn, focused. He began to plan. The younger gods sensed it. They were not fools. They understood. The old ways were changing, and the old powers would not surrender easily. Ea, the Watcher, took action. He discovered Apsu's intent and acted before the Father of Waters could strike. He cast spells, deep and binding. He moved through shadows, and in a moment of silent finality, he destroyed Apsu. It was the first death. The ocean recoiled. The deep, once whole, now trembled. Tiamat woke, not fully, not yet, but something in her shifted. Her other half was gone. Her stillness shattered. Her grief, like her power, was immeasurable. She had not consented to this. She had not chosen sides. But now, a line had been drawn. Apsu had fallen. The children had taken blood. The mother of all began to change. In the silence, after death, the ocean whispered once again. But this time, it whispered of war. Chapter 4. The silence breaks. For an age beyond memory, there had been no conflict. The ocean, deep, eternal, limitless, had known only harmony, not peace through stillness, but peace through balance, salt and fresh, Tiamat and Apsu, darkness without threat, movement without violence. Now that harmony was broken, Apsu was gone, struck down by one of the very beings he helped bring into existence. The silence that followed his death was not like the silence before. It was heavy, it was cracked, it was the kind of silence that trembles beneath the surface of a scream. Tiamat drifted alone, the vast mother of the sea, once serene, once silent, now turned within herself. She did not cry, she did not shout, but the water around her darkened. She felt something she had never known before. Asterisk, asterisk loss, asterisk, asterisk, not the fading of waves or the pull of a tide, but something deeper, a weight that coiled around her ancient being. It pressed into her bones, into her breath, into the very salt that defined her, and beneath that grief, something else stirred. Asterisk, asterisk, fury dot, asterisk. It was not immediate. At first, it was confusion. She had not chosen this conflict. She had not ordered Apsu to destroy the children, nor had she asked for him to be destroyed. But he was gone, and the ocean no longer felt whole. The young gods celebrated their victory. They believed they had preserved their place in the cosmos. They saw themselves as heroes, clever, brave, triumphant. They did not see Tiamat's shadow moving in the deep. They did not hear the slow shift of her body as it began to rise. She had always been chaos, but a chaos that slept, a chaos content to remain beneath the surface. Now she was waking. Her thoughts were not human. They did not follow paths of logic or revenge as we understand them. They moved in waves, in pressure, in storm. She felt betrayal, not only of Apsu's death, but of the order she had once allowed. She had given the young gods life, and they had torn her world apart. She would answer, not with words, with transformation. Tiamat, the ocean, the mother, the quiet, began to twist. Her form, once formless, began to take shape. Long coils, burning eyes, a mouth filled with storms. She became something new, not because she wanted power, not because she sought glory, because she could not remain still. She would not be ignored. The silence was over, and in the deepest places of the cosmos, the first winds began to howl. Chapter 5. The mother awakens. Deep within the endless ocean, the ancient mother began to move. Tiamat had been still for longer than time could measure. She had floated in the dark before creation had a name. She had given life without planning it, without understanding it, and now her peace had been taken. Apsu, her companion in silence, was gone. The children they had birthed had turned against him, and in doing so they had changed the very fabric of the deep. At first, her sorrow was quiet. She remembered him not as a god, but as a presence, a stillness that had matched her own. Together, they had balanced the ocean. Now the sea felt uneven, crooked, filled with noise. Tiamat did not cry. Tears were too small for what she felt. Instead, her grief thickened. It spread like ink through water, slow and dark. It coiled through her body. It stirred in her chest like a storm that had waited too long to rise. And then she changed, not suddenly, not violently, but like the tide pulling away from shore, slowly revealing what had always been hidden. Tiamat had always been more than water, more than salt. She was chaos in its purest form, and now chaos stirred. Her body lengthened, her limbs stretched, Her breath grew hot. She began to take shape, not because she desired it, but because the universe needed it. She became the dragon, a creature not of this world, but of all worlds. Massive, coiled, covered in scales that shimmered with starlight and shadow. Her eyes burned with the memory of silence. Her wings, vast as the sky, beat with ancient rhythm. The gods had woken something they could not control. She did not speak in language. She did not send warnings. Her very presence was a declaration. The mother had awakened, and she was not pleased. The young gods felt it, not as a sound, but as a shift. The deep grew colder. The currents reversed. The light they had brought began to flicker. Something was coming. But Tiamat did not come alone. As her fury deepened, she began to shape new beings, children of her wrath, creatures unlike anything the gods had seen. Serpents with fire in their throats, scorpion men with claws that could cut through stone, bull-headed giants who spoke only in thunder. She gave them life with her anger. She gave them purpose with her grief. They would fight for her, not to conquer, but to cleanse, to return the world to what it had been: silent, still, whole. At the center of them all, she placed her chosen, King Yu. He would be her general, her voice, her vengeance. And so, from the mother's sorrow, an army was born. The ocean no longer whispered. It rumbled, it twisted, it breathed fire. Tiamat was awake, and the gods would soon learn what it meant to betray the one who made them. Chapter 6. The Rise of the Monsters. Tiamat did not cry out. Her pain did not echo in words, nor did her fury burn in the sky. Instead, she created, not from love, not from hope, from rage, from memory, from silence that had turned to fire. The death of Apsu had shattered something ancient. The quiet order of the deep, the children she had birthed, had turned from her rhythm, mocking the balance that had once held the cosmos in stillness. So she rose, and with her rising came the unmaking of everything. But even a dragon, as vast as Tiamat, cannot stand alone. She needed a force, a shape for her vengeance, a body for her chaos. And so she began to form them, beings born not of flesh, but of nightmare and storm. Her first creations were serpents, not the gentle ones that glide through reeds and rivers, but enormous coils of living heat. They glowed from within, with molten fire in their veins. Their breath smoked, their eyes burned. Then came the scorpion men, creatures whose upper bodies were human-like, muscular, towering, armored with stone, but whose lower halves were segmented, curled and venomous. Their stingers dripped with poison, said to unravel the soul before the flesh. She shaped lion-headed demons with claws that could split mountains. She breathed into existence creatures of shadow, formless, whispering, feeding on thought. Some had wings like bats, others crawled with too many limbs. All were alive with a single purpose: to bring down the children of light. Each monster reflected something broken. Each was a distortion of natural law, a reversal of what the young gods had tried to build. Tiamat was not simply creating an army. She was crafting a message. You broke the silence, she was saying. Now you will face the sound of your own undoing. But the creatures were not mindless. They did not shriek or flail without purpose. They waited, organized, trained in the language of war, not spoken but breathed. Tanned at their head, she placed her chosen, asterisk, asterisk, King U. Asterisk, asterisk. He was unlike the rest, not beast, but God, not created from chaos, born of it. From her own essence, she shaped him. King Yu had a face, almost human, yet more, eyes like obsidian stars, a voice that carried the weight of oceans. To him, she gave more than command. She gave power. In his hands she placed the asterisk, asterisk, Tablets of Destiny, asterisk, asterisk, ancient relics said to control fate itself. With them Kingu could write and rewrite the very rules of reality. The stars would obey him, time would kneel. The other gods trembled. They saw what was rising beneath the waves. Not just monsters, but a new order, an order of reversal, where dragons ruled and children bowed. Tiamat watched them all, her new children, twisted, beautiful, glorious. They sang no hymns, they built no temples, but they were hers. The scorpion men stood in silent ranks. The bull-headed giants pounded the earth with fists like thunder. The fire serpents coiled around mountain spines, waiting to strike. Each monster, a reflection of divine betrayal. Each body, a monument to her grief. The gods had chosen movement, so Tiamat answered with stillness, armed for war. The silence she had once known was gone, but in its place, she had built something far older than speech, a reckoning. And deep in the dark, the monsters waited for her command. The sky had not yet torn, the battle had not yet begun, but already the world held its breath. Chapter 7, Kingu and the Tablets of Destiny. From the swirling womb of Tiamat's rage, he emerged. Kingu, he was not like the other children of chaos, the scorpion men, the lion demons, the serpent beasts. They were born of bone and fury, given shape through Tiamat's grief, and forged for war. But Kingu was something more. He was chosen, he was sacred, he was her voice and her vengeance. When Tiamat looked upon him for the first time, the ocean itself seemed to pause. The waves stilled, the monsters bowed, even the stars, distant and untouched, flickered in uneasy rhythm. Kingu stood tall, not beast, but divine. His body shimmered with the sheen of volcanic stone, veins like rivers of black fire pulsing beneath his skin. His eyes, deep, endless, held within them the memory of the silence that once was, and the fury of what had been lost. He spoke rarely, but when he did, the ocean listened. Tiamat had breathed into him, her sorrow, her fury, her memory, everything she had once held quietly in the deep. Now it burned in him, a second heart to the monsters she had crafted. He was a general. To Tiamat, he was a son, but most of all, he was asterisk, asterisk, the wielder of the Tablets of Destiny. To asterisk, asterisk, they were not simply objects, not scrolls, not weapons, not spells. They were reality, written and bound, stone slabs older than time, etched with the fundamental laws of existence, not laws made by gods, but laws that asterisk made asterisk gods. Whoever held the tablets could shape fate itself. Stars would turn at their command, mountains would rise or crumble with a whisper. Life and death would no longer be accidents, but instructions. The tablets were not given, they were not earned. Tiamat, asterisk, asterisk, gifted asterisk, asterisk, them to Kingu, an act as ancient as it was blasphemous. In the order that had ruled the young gods, only high deities, creators, or cosmic rulers were allowed to touch the tablets. And yet, here stood Kingu, born of vengeance, anointed by chaos, holding the very fabric of the universe in his hands. He did not flinch, he wore them like armor. Each tablet hovered around him like orbiting moons, spinning slowly, covered in glowing symbols none could read, but all could feel. They pulsed with meaning, with weight, with the power to change the story. And so the hierarchy of the cosmos began to shift. Where once Anu reigned, now Kingu challenged. Where once Anu breathed wind, now fire coiled behind him. Where once Es had ended Apsu, now he faced the one crowned by the sea itself. The younger gods watched, nervous, uncertain. They had slain a father, but awakened a force far greater. Kingu did not attack. He did not scream or summon storms. He stood, still, massive, certain, surrounded by beasts who would obey his word before it was spoken. Tiamat watched him from afar, curled in her new form. Her dragon's breath steamed through galaxies. She had found in Kingo not only a commander, but a continuation. Through him, she would not need to speak. Through him, she would not need to explain. He was her answer, and yet, within the younger gods, fear began to settle. The balance had broken, power had shifted, the tablets, their secret foundation, were no longer theirs. With them, Kingo could strip gods of their names. He could unmake heavens. He could bend time like a reed, and cast destiny into fire, but he had not yet used them. And that, perhaps, was the greatest terror, for when a weapon is drawn, but not used, it is not mercy that holds it back, it is purpose. Kingo was waiting. He knew the battle would come. He knew the gods would strike, and when they did, he would answer not with a sword, but with asterisk, command, asterisk. Tiamat had given him the last word, not in voice, in destiny. And the universe, though still standing, had begun to feel the weight of that silence. Chapter 8. The Council of the Gods. The heavens trembled, not with war, not yet, but with questions, with fear. The younger gods, those bright and restless children of the deep, had believed themselves victorious. They had slain Apsu. They had claimed their place in the world, though they had carved space out of darkness and called it creation, but they had not seen what stirred in the sea behind them. Now, they saw. Tiamat had risen. The mother, once silent, now burned like a wound across the sky. Her monstrous children stirred beneath her, and Kingo stood at the center, holding the tablets of destiny, the very laws of all things. The gods gathered, one by one. They came to the high place, not a palace of gold, or a throne of light, but a place beyond place, a fold in reality, where divine minds could speak and tremble together. Anshar, the Sky Father, was the first to speak. His voice, once steady, now wavered. "She will not stop," he said. "We have taken from her. She comes to take it back." The others murmured, whispers carried between stars. "She is chaos. She is grief. She is death." They spoke in riddles, in riddled fear. They spoke of the monsters, of the poisoned sea, of the return of silence, but a silence made of ash and flame. They had no plan. None dared face her. They remembered her as she once was, vast and dreaming, the calm ocean in which they were born. But now, she was something else, something awake, something watching, and Kingu, the child of vengeance, a shadow wearing power, his hands wrapped around the tablets, his eyes full of certainty. Ea, the clever one, spoke last. "It was I who slew Apsu," he said. "I who began this, and I cannot undo it." He bowed his head. "She is beyond me now." Then silence fell among them, not the silence of peace, the silence of gods who understood that they were no longer in control. They began to search for a warrior, for a champion, for someone who could stand before the Dragon Mother and not be consumed. They spoke the names of many. None dared step forward. Not Anu, not Inya, not Ea himself. They were builders, singers, bringers of light, but none of them were made for war like this. Until one voice broke the stillness. "I will go." It was low, calm, certain. Marduk, youngest of the gods, born of purpose, tall and radiant, with eyes like burning storm clouds. They turned to him. "You would face her?" they asked. He nodded. "But if I win," he said, "I will rule, not just the skies, not just the earth, all." There was no hesitation. The gods agreed. What other choice did they have? And so it was done. The council disbanded. The gods returned to their corners of creation. each wondering if they had just sent their last hope into the jaws of the beginning. Only Marduk remained. He stood alone beneath the turning stars, listening to the ocean beyond the edge of sound, and Tiamat, in the deep, opened her eyes. Chapter 9. The god who stands alone, Marduk, stood at the edge of all things. The sky above him swirled with slow-moving stars. The earth beneath him pulsed with ancient breath. In the distance, the ocean stretched, dark, infinite, waiting. Behind him, the gods had fallen silent. They had given him their blessing. They had offered their prayers, their hopes, their fears, but they would not fight. They could not. He was alone, but Marduk was not afraid. He was young, born not in silence, but in storm. He was shaped by thunder, raised by light, fed by the pulse of stars. His breath carried the wind, his fingers shaped flame. He was a child of chaos, but not its servant. He did not wish for war, but he did not turn from it either. He began to prepare. First, he fashioned a great net, woven from the bones of mountains and the breath of wind, a trap for the mother who had no form, a snare for the dragon whose body stretched through galaxies. Next, he took up his bow, carved from the spine of the sky itself, its string, a line of light, pulled tight with purpose, its arrows, sharp as memory, swift as thought. He carried also a mace, heavy, unbreakable, forged in the first fires of the cosmos, cooled in the waters of the deepest well. But these were not his greatest weapons. He summoned the winds, all four, north, south, east, west, and then the other winds, the strange ones, the hidden, the forgotten, the ones that whispered through dreams and screamed through storms. They came to him, not as slaves, but as brothers. They gathered at his feet. They wrapped around his arms. They waited for his command. The sky darkened. The world watched, and Marduk spoke, not to the gods, not to the stars, but to the deep itself. Tiamat, he said, you are chaos, I am order. You are mother, I am son. You are ending, I am beginning. Come. His voice rolled through the heavens, and the ocean answered. It rose, it boiled, it burned. From its depths, she emerged. Tiamat, no longer formless, no longer hidden. She came with wings that blotted out suns, with claws that tore at time, with eyes that remembered the silence before breath. Her mouth opened, and fire poured forth. Her tail coiled around stars. Her body shimmered with ancient power. Around her, the army followed. Monsters, beasts, horrors beyond name. And at her side, King Yu, holding the tablets of destiny, his gaze fixed on the god who dared to stand alone. Marduk did not move. The winds howled at his back. His weapons shimmered. His eyes burned not with rage, but with clarity. This was not just a battle. This was the moment the universe would change. Forever. Tiamat roared, a sound that shook the bones of the world, and Marduk stepped forward. Chapter 10. The clash of chaos and order. The stars held their breath. The sea curled inward. Time itself slowed as two forces, ancient, immense, and unyielding, moved toward one another. Marduk and Tiamat, order and chaos, son and mother, creator and unmaker. They met not on a battlefield of stone or sky, but in the fabric of reality itself. Every breath, every ripple of air, every heartbeat in every living creature paused for that moment. Tiamat surged forward first, a wave of shadow, wings like mountains beating thunder into space, her mouth, a burning cave, open to release a storm of venom and flame. Her scream was not sound, it was pressure, memory, a roar that cracked the heavens and sent the young gods trembling in their hidden places. But Marduk stood firm, the winds at his back spun into motion. He called them by name, whispered their forgotten syllables, and they obeyed. North wind struck first, slicing through the smoke, then the east, curling around her wings, south, rising beneath her, west, rushing into her mouth, forcing it open. She staggered, and in that instant, Marduk loosed his arrow. It flew with silence, cut through fire, split the darkness, and struck her in the throat. Her cry choked, her body lurched, stars collapsed around her, the sea buckled, but she did not fall. She turned, writhing, raging, her tail crashing into moons, her claws scraping through dimensions. She charged again. Marduk raised his net. It unfolded across the sky, like a constellation being born, threads of wind and mountain and flame, interlaced to trap her form. Even as it shifted from dragon to serpent to storm, she fought it, screaming spells older than time. The monsters below howled, serpents writhed, scorpion men leapt into battle, but they could not reach him. Marduk had ascended beyond their world. He was now more than a god. He was purpose, will, structure. He was the shape things would take. He struck again, this time, not with arrow, not with net, but with word. He spoke her true name, the one hidden beneath salt and sorrow, the name only the ocean remembered. And in that moment, Tiamat faltered, the fires in her mouth dimmed, her wings dropped, her storm, for the briefest breath, paused, and Marduk struck. His mace, glowing with the breath of the cosmos, fell upon her chest. She screamed, and the scream cracked the sky. The wind became fire, the sea became smoke, and in a final burst of fury, she collapsed. The dragon mother fell. Her body, colossal, endless, did not vanish. It hung there, broken, sacred. Marduk stood over her, the wind silent now, and he looked upon what had been done. Not a victory, not a conquest, a transformation. From her body, he would build a world. From her bones, the mountains. From her blood, the rivers. From her sorrow, the souls of men. But not yet, for now there was silence, a silence different from the one before, not the silence of sleep, the silence after thunder. Then the gods above, watching from far corners of the cosmos, knew the universe had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 11. The body of a goddess Tiamat had fallen. Her great wings, once spread across galaxies, lay torn and still. The roar that had shaken the stars was gone. Her body drifted in the cosmic sea, like a broken moon, vast and weightless, lit from within by the final embers of her fury. But death, in myth, is never the end. It is a doorway. Marduk stood over her, not as a conqueror, not with pride or celebration, but with a strange, quiet reverence. He had not merely slain a dragon, he had struck down the origin of chaos, the mother of gods, the sea from which all things were born. And now, something had to come next. Her defeat had created a void, a silence so large it demanded to be filled. He looked upon her and saw not ruin, but material. This was the moment of decision, and Marduk chose creation. With his hands, he began to divide her body, with precision, with care, with intent. He split her form down the middle. From the upper half, he shaped the heavens, a vast dome arched high above the world, filled with stars carved from the sparks of her eyes. From the lower half, he formed the earth, a firm, wide foundation on which life could one day walk. Her spine became the mountains, her ribs, the arching vaults of the sky, her tail, a great river, winding through the land to remind all living things of their origin in the sea. Her eyes wept one last time, and from those tears flowed the great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, two lines of life cutting through the dust, carrying memory, carrying breath. Her blood, rich with divine chaos, was gathered. Marduk mixed it with earth, and from it, he formed the first humans, not as gods, but as a balance, as a reminder they would walk between chaos and order, forever shaped by both. Her voice, though silenced, echoed in the wind. It became the low rumble of storms, the call of the ocean, the whisper inside every silence. She was gone, but she was everywhere, in the stones, in the sky, in the blood of humankind. Marduk did not erase her, he did not bury her, he used her, honored her, because even chaos, even grief, even wrath, could become the foundation of something new. The other gods watched, some with awe, some with fear, some with guilt. Tiamat had been their mother, and now she was the world. In the end, this was not a story of victory, not a story of good over evil. It was a story of transformation, of what comes after collapse, of what must be done with the pieces when the center no longer holds. From the death of a goddess came the birth of everything, and so, the sky above and the earth below, forever separate, forever connected, whisper the same truth. We were made from chaos, and she still lives within us. Chapter 12. A new order forged. The war was over. The roar of battle faded into the vastness of space. Tiamat, the Dragon Mother, now existed not as a being, but as the very fabric of reality, her body shaped into the heavens, her breath woven into winds, her blood coursing through rivers and veins alike. The cosmos had been reshaped by her fall, and now something had to rise in her place. The gods, still trembling from the memory of her power, turned their eyes to Marduk. He had done what none of them could. He had faced the chaos that gave them life, and had not only survived but reshaped it. It was not strength alone that had made him victorious. It was vision, will, purpose. He had brought order to the unformed, and so the gods came together once more, but this time not to whisper in fear or cast glances at one another across the void. This time they came to crown. Marduk stood at the center of the divine assembly. Light flowed around him like a second skin. The winds still curled at his feet, loyal and ready. The heavens now stretched above him. His design, the earth, solid beneath him. His legacy, he no longer stood among the gods. He stood above them. They offered him the throne, not only of the skies, but of all things. Supreme ruler of the cosmos, the one who would bring balance where before there had been conflict. Marduk accepted, not with pride, but with the same calm purpose he had shown since the beginning. But with power came duty. He knew the universe, freshly born from the corpse of chaos, was fragile. It needed structure, rules, rhythms, roles. Without them, it would dissolve once more into the sea from which it came. So Marduk set to work, not as a king but as a craftsman. He divided the heavens into paths for the stars and set them on their courses. He mapped the seasons, the sun's rise and fall, the moon's dance through shadow. Time, which before had been a drifting mist, now had shape. It circled, it returned, it gave meaning to change. He placed the gods in their roles, Enlil over wind, Shamash over sun, Ishtar over love and war, each given a sphere, a power, a domain. No longer free-floating, no longer wandering, each divine presence became a pillar of the new world, to protect the heavens from ever again collapsing into chaos. Marduk formed guards, spirits of order, to patrol the edges of the sky and the gates of night. He created the calendar, the day, the night, the holy, the mundane, and in the center of all things, he placed the humans, not as servants, not as pawns, but as the bridge formed from clay and divine blood. Humankind was born to live between forces, between the chaos that had birthed them and the order that now cradled them. They would build, they would struggle, they would remember. Marduk watched them with something close to tenderness, for in them he saw the echo of what had come before, the salt of the sea, the spark of gods, the memory of dragons. The new order was not perfect. It pulsed with tension. Beneath the rivers and temples and songs, the echo of Tiamat's scream still lingered, but it was balanced. It held, and so from death and fire, from broken wings and scattered stars, the world began. A world of rhythm, of pattern, of purpose. A world where chaos slept, not vanished, but transformed. And at its center sat Marduk, ruler, not only of gods, but of the space between breath and silence. The age of wandering was over. The age of structure had begun. Chapter 13. The Echo of Chaos. Though Tiamat had been defeated, and Marduk had shaped the universe from her remains, her presence did not vanish. Chaos does not die. It retreats. It hides. It whispers. The new world thrived. The skies turned in perfect rhythm. The stars followed their paths. The moon waxed and waned. Rivers flowed where they were meant to flow. Seasons passed in quiet, expected circles. Humanity began to grow, to build, to wonder. But even in this ordered creation, something ancient stirred beneath the surface. In the shadows between stars, in the quiet spaces beneath mountains, in the hush that follows thunder, there was still the breath of the Dragon Mother. Her essence lingered in every part of the world, in every drop of salt water, in every storm that refused to follow the wind. Marduk knew this. He did not pretend that chaos had been erased. He had not destroyed it, only shaped it. And though he wore his crown and sat upon his throne, he often looked out at the horizon with narrowed eyes, watching the places where shadows grew too deep, where order bent just slightly around the edges. The gods whispered of it too, though never loudly. Some said they felt her in their dreams. Some heard a song at the edge of sleep, a lullaby made of waves and flame. Some even feared that the monsters she had made would rise again, that they, like her, could not be unmade entirely. For what is chaos, if not the mother of transformation? Even in a world of order, there is change, and all change carries the scent of her breath. In temples, priests told stories of her fall. They painted her as the enemy, the devourer, the serpent of endless night. But the older ones, the sages, the poets, the dreamers, knew better. They spoke of her not with fear, but with reverence. She was not evil. She was necessary. She was the wave that clears the shore, the fire that resets the forest. Without her, there would be no beginning. And so her echo lived on, not in rebellion, but in memory, in the rage of oceans, in the cracks of the earth, in the voice of a woman giving birth, screaming and shaking, bringing something new into the world. Marduk, for all his strength, ruled over a world born of contradiction. He had given it laws, but those laws would be tested. He had given it structure, but structure invites tension, and chaos waits for tension. The humans, shaped from clay and divine blood, felt it too, deep in their bones. They knew they were not just sons of order, but descendants of something older, something wilder. They built their cities, they wrote their laws, but in every fire they lit, they saw a flicker of her. In every flood, every quake, every war, there she was again, reminding them that nothing ever stays still. The world, they realized, was not a prison of order. It was a dance, a rhythm between creation and collapse. Marduk may have won the war, but Tiamat had become the stage upon which all things now moved. And though her roar had faded, her whisper remained, not to threaten, to remind that even in the most carefully built world, chaos is never far away, not as an enemy, but as the breath between beginnings. Chapter 14. The tablets returned, amid the silence that followed Tiamat's fall, amid the shaping of the heavens and the dividing of earth. There remained one piece of unfinished power, the asterisk, tablets of destiny. Asterisk, they had not been forgotten. In the heat of battle, they had gleamed upon King Yu's chest, heavy, glowing, ancient, bound to him not just by touch, but by purpose. For a brief time, he had wielded the authority of the cosmos. With those tablets, he could have rewritten the laws of existence, but King Yu had fallen alongside his mother. Marduk, standing over the body of his enemy, saw the tablets still intact, hovering faintly above the broken chest of the one who had dared to hold them. They pulsed with slow, steady power, undiminished by death. He reached for them, and the moment his fingers touched the stone, the world shifted, not violently, no great quake or cry, but with a deep, cosmic recognition, like a lock clicking into place. The universe understood. These were no longer King Yu's. They were his. The power that had once challenged the gods now belonged to the one who had restored their world. The tablets of destiny did not resist. They moved to Marduk's command, aligning themselves with his will. Their inscriptions, the strange and ancient symbols that danced with light, now spoke to him clearly, not as riddles, but as laws, equations of existence, the architecture of stars and time. Marduk did not use them to dominate. He did not erase the other gods. Instead, he fulfilled a promise. He returned the tablets to their rightful place, not in the hands of a single god, but at the center of divine law. He placed them in the temple of Ikor, high above the earth, in the house of Inshul, so that the order of the universe would be guarded, not by power alone, but by tradition, by lineage, by balance. But even in their resting place, the tablets remained alive. The scribes who walked near them swore they could hear whispers in the walls. The priests who touched the ground beneath the altar felt their skin grow warm, as if truth were rising through the stone. And it was said, quietly, always quietly, that the tablets did not simply hold the rules of the world. They remembered Apsu's stillness. They remembered Tiamat's rage. They remembered the cries of the first gods, the roar of dragons, the silence that followed death. And somewhere deep within them, perhaps, they remembered King Yu, not as a villain, but as a bearer of burden, a creature not of choice, but of fate. The tablets were no longer his, but they carried his echo. And so, while Marduk ruled, and the heavens spun, and the gods resumed their seats, the tablets of destiny remained at the heart of it all, untouched by time, unread by mortals, unbroken, not just objects of power, but memory itself, a reminder that the rules which govern the world were written in chaos, tested by fire, and now, finally, guarded by order. Yet even the strongest order must watch its foundations, for the tablets wait, and they remember everything. Chapter 16. The gods remember time past, though gods do not count it as mortals do. The stars wheeled endlessly in the heavens, following the paths Marduk had etched for them. The seasons turned in their slow and graceful dance. The sun rose and fell with divine precision. Humanity spread across the land, building temples, telling stories, lighting fires in honor of their unseen makers. But high above, in the quiet places where only gods tread, memories lingered. The gods remembered. They remembered the silence before anything was born. They remembered the moment the first ripple broke the surface of the deep, They remembered Tiamat, not just as a monster or a threat, but as the beginning. They remembered Apsu, the stillness that came before song. They remembered the fear, the war, the roar that cracked the sky. They remembered what it was like to be unsure. Even now, with Marduk seated upon the throne, and order reigning across the cosmos, the memory of chaos sat in the corners of their minds like a fading dream, one that never quite disappears, no matter how much time or light is placed between then and now. Some gods spoke of it aloud. They gathered in quiet sanctuaries, in shadowed groves far from mortal ears, and wondered, had they done the right thing? Yes, they had survived. Yes, Marduk had saved them from destruction, but was the cost too high? Tiamat had not chosen war on her own. She had been driven there, betrayed, wounded, transformed. They spoke her name not with reverence, but not with hatred either. She was mother, she was memory, she was the blood in the veins of every living thing. Others, more proud, dismissed such talk. They said the past must remain past. The old chaos was gone, and a new world had been built in its place. There was no room for doubt now, no room for grief. What was done, but even those who denied the weight of memory felt it in their bones, in every thunderstorm, in every strange shift in the wind, in every dream, where a voice too ancient to name whispered from beneath the waves. The gods were immortal, yes, but they were not immune to longing, not for chaos, but for meaning, for a time when they had not yet been shaped into roles, when they had been wild and new and full of questions. They watched the humans below, flawed, temporary, loud, dreaming, and saw in them something familiar. The humans stumbled, they struggled, they disobeyed, but they lived. They carried the spark of both Tiamat and Marduk, order and chaos in one body. The gods, once so distant, began to draw closer to these beings of clay and blood, not to control them, but to remember through them. They sent signs, dreams, echoes, not commands, but invitations, to listen, to wonder, to remember. For in memory there is truth, and in truth there is reverence. The gods remembered Tiamat, and in doing so they remembered themselves. Chapter 17. The breath. Beneath the waters, beneath the surface of the world, far below where rivers run and roots dig, where even the memory of light grows thin, something ancient still stirred. The world above had changed. The heavens moved in their appointed paths. Humans built cities of stone and lit fires to hold back the night. They prayed to Marduk, to Enlil, to Shamash and Ishtar. Their lives were small, flickering, full of sound and sorrow and joy. But beneath it all, beneath the soil, beneath the seas, there remained a breath that had never stopped. It did not roar. It did not speak. It pulsed, a rhythm older than time, the breath of the first ocean, the echo of Tiamat. Though her body had been carved into the very structure of creation, though her bones now held up mountains, and her tears fed rivers, something of her still existed whole, hidden, untouched, waiting. It was not her form, not the dragon of battle and flame. That shape had passed. It was her essence, the deep, slow force that had birthed gods before there were names. In hidden caverns where light had never reached, in the lowest trenches of the sea, there were whispers, not in language, but in pressure, in silence, in dreams. Fishermen spoke of strange stillness beneath the waves, of nights when the water would grow unnaturally calm, and the fish would vanish, and the air would feel heavy, like something vast was listening. Children woke from dreams of a great eye beneath the sea, not cruel, not kind, just watching. Priests, though they would never admit it aloud, sometimes heard voices during prayer, Not the bright, clear voices of the high gods, but something deeper, slower, a feeling, more than a sound. The sages and mystics, those who wandered far from cities and temples, spoke of a presence in the earth. They said the world itself seemed to breathe, slowly and endlessly, and that if one was very still, they could feel it, rising and falling beneath their feet, like the tides of some hidden sea. They did not fear it, they did not worship it, they simply knew Tiamat was not gone, not truly, not entirely. She had become part of the world, yes, but the world had not consumed her, it had only given her new shape, scattered across sky and stone and water, and somewhere, perhaps in the deep, or in the hearts of those who wandered without answers, she remained, not angry, not vengeful, patient, because chaos does not need to destroy, it only waits for the moment, when stillness forgets that it came from motion, when law forgets that it was born from lawlessness, when gods forget that they too were shaped by things they did not create. In that breath beneath the waters, in that silence between thunder and thought, she is there, not sleeping, simply waiting, not to rise, but to be remembered. Chapter 18. The first fire. Long after the fall of Tiamat, long after the skies had been drawn and the rivers set loose, humankind continued to grow. They tilled the earth, they shaped stone, they learned the names of stars, and tried to guess the thoughts of the gods. Their lives were brief, but full, and then one night, they made something that would change everything. Fire. It began not with magic, but with accident. A flash in the dark, a tree struck by lightning, flames devouring wood, throwing shadows across the ground. The humans stood at a distance, afraid. Then slowly, they stepped closer. They reached toward it, not with hands, but with hunger, for warmth, for light, for power. Fire was not just survival, it was memory, because when the flames leapt into the sky, they mirrored something older, a light that had once burned in the mouth of a dragon, a heat that had lived in the belly of a goddess, though they did not know her name. The humans had summoned an echo of Tiamat. It danced in the fire. The gods saw it. From high places they watched mortals carry flame from branch to branch, cave to cave. They saw how the fire made stories possible, how it lit the night and pulled people together. Around it, songs were sung, wounds were healed, and dreams were born. But fire also brought danger. It gave humans a tool that could create or destroy. They burned forests to clear fields. They forged weapons from earth and bone. They used fire to cook food, and sometimes to wage war. For the first time, the gods felt something stir in humankind that resembled their own divine will, desire, creation, control, and chaos. The line between gods and mortals thinned. Fire, once the domain of heavens and dragons, now lived in the hands of beings made from clay. It crackled with potential, with memory, with risk. Marduk watched in silence. He did not intervene. This was not the return of Tiamat. It was the proof of her legacy. She had not died. She had become. Her essence now lived in the things that could not be controlled. In storms, in dreams, in fire. Each spark carried a whisper of the past. Each flame carried the potential for new creation. The other gods debated whether fire had been given too soon, whether mortals were ready, whether this small light would someday bring ruin. But deep inside the world, something older than the gods stirred, and if it could speak, it might have said, "Let them burn, let them build, let them remember that the first fire was not a gift from the heavens, it was the child of chaos. And like all children of chaos, it came not to destroy the world, but to remind it how to change. Chapter 19. The turning of the wheel. The world had taken its shape. The heavens spun in quiet arcs. The earth held firm beneath the feet of humankind, and the gods, each in their place, watched the passing of days. Yet beneath the calm surface of creation, the wheel of existence had begun to turn. At first, the turning was gentle. Seasons came and went. The rivers flooded, then receded. Crops rose from the ground, bloomed, died, and fed the next cycle. People were born, grew strong, grew old, and returned to the earth that had shaped them. Everything had its time, and within that time, there was peace, but no peace lasts forever. Marduk, from his high throne in the celestial palace, saw what the others did not. He saw how the wheel, once slow and predictable, began to speed up. Change came more quickly. The lives of mortals shifted. They built homes, then cities, then empires. They carved images of the gods into stone, then into metal, then into memory. With each generation, their gaze turned further from the heavens and deeper into the world around them. The world had once been a mystery. Now, it became something to be measured, claimed, controlled. They studied the stars, not to worship them, but to predict them. They spoke the names of the gods, but fewer truly listened. And yet, in all this striving, in all this noise, something essential was happening. Mortals were not falling away from the divine. They were drawing closer to it, though not always in ways the gods had expected, because Marduk had given them order, but he had also left them with the spark of chaos. It lived in their hearts, in their curiosity, in their refusal to stay still. Tiamat's echo pulsed quietly through their instincts, not as destruction, but as drive. The same chaos that once threatened the cosmos now pushed humanity to create, to question, to begin again. The gods saw it in cycles, each age giving way to the next. Peace led to comfort, comfort to arrogance, arrogance to collapse. Then, from the ruins, something new would rise. The wheel would turn, over and over. Some gods turned their faces away from this pattern. They did not understand why Marduk allowed such imperfection, why he did not step in and stop the collapse before it came. But Marduk understood. He had known from the moment he stood over Tiamat's fallen form that the world could not be static, that order without motion becomes prison, that chaos without guidance becomes ruin. But when held in balance, they form the rhythm of life itself. So he let the wheel turn. He watched empires rise on the backs of hope and fall in waves of dust. He saw temples built to him, fall silent, only for his name to be rediscovered centuries later, carved into clay, buried beneath forgotten cities. He listened to prayers spoken in languages long dead. He watched mortals reinvent what had already been known and call it new. And in each turning, he heard something deeper, a lesson, the lesson that no creation is final, that even the greatest design must bend to time, to change, to the unknowable current of becoming. He had shaped the world from the corpse of chaos. He had given it laws, borders, time, but even he could not freeze it in place. Life does not obey walls. It slips through cracks. It finds the broken places and grows there. The wheel turned again, and in a small village, a child was born who would grow to speak truths the gods had forgotten. In a distant land, a woman looked at the stars and realized they moved like breath. In the heart of a forest, a fire was lit that would never be fully explained, and through it all, Marduk remained, not distant, not absent, just still, watching, learning, remembering that he too had come from chaos, that even gods are shaped by what they cannot control. The world did not need perfection. It needed rhythm. It needed a wheel that turned, not to reach an end, but to keep life moving forward, and so he let it turn. Chapter 20. The Forgotten Ones. As centuries passed, and empires crumbled into dust, not all gods remained seated on high thrones, basking in worship. Some faded, others drifted, and a few were simply forgotten. They were not the great names carved into stone or remembered in firelit chants. They were the older ones, the quieter ones, spirits of the in-between, guardians of moments too small for myths, of thresholds, of echoes, of the pause between breath and word. In the earliest days, they had walked beside the greater gods, when Tiamat still slumbered and the seas had no name. These beings moved through the folds of the world, unnoticed but necessary. They guided the shifting of shadows. They gave form to the silence. They carried dreams from the mouth of chaos to the edge of creation. But when Marduk rose, when order settled like a net over the stars, there was less space for what could not be named. Temples were not built for them. Altars did not burn with their symbols. Mortals, eager to understand, to label, to claim, left little room for the unknowable. And so slowly, the forgotten ones began to slip from memory. They did not vanish. No god truly dies. They retreated into the corners of the world, into the rustle of leaves at dusk, into the chill before rain, into the eyes of animals watching from the dark. You would not know them. If you saw them, you would feel them. A presence just beyond your reach, a shiver with no wind, a thought that feels borrowed. They became part of the world in quieter ways. Some drifted into rivers, becoming their moods, the difference between a stream that sings and one that waits. Some took refuge in old ruins, watching time pass with slow, patient breath. Others made homes in the hearts of solitary people, artists, wanderers, those who never quite fit the lines drawn by society. And though they were forgotten, they were not without power, because even as the world moved forward, faster, louder, brighter, there were still moments when the veil thinned, a dream that felt too real, a sound in the forest that wasn't quite an animal, a whisper from water, from smoke, from stone. These were the gifts of the forgotten, not grand miracles, but reminders. Reminders that the world was once wild, that before law and language there had been magic without explanation, and that magic had not left. It had simply stepped aside. Marduk knew they were still there. He had not banished them. He understood their place. Though he ruled the heavens and the earth, he knew there were places his light could not reach and should not reach. So he left space, small sacred gaps in the weave of the world, hollows where the forgotten could rest, could wait, could breathe. They did not seek return. They did not hunger for temples or praise. They were content to be forgotten, because in forgetting there is freedom. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the world begins to feel too tight, too sharp, too bound by names and rules, one of the forgotten ones will stir. They will rise, not to rule, but to remind that before the first god drew breath, the world was wide, and it still is. Chapter 21. The blood of the earth, deep beneath the feet of mortals, and the roots of mountains, where the warmth of the world pulses in slow, steady rhythm, there flows something ancient, something alive. It is not water, though it moves like a river. It is not fire, though it burns. The old ones called it the blood of the earth. It moves in silence, carving hidden paths through stone, through pressure, through memory. It remembers the forming of the world. It remembers Tiamat, for though her form was broken and her body shaped into sky and soil, something of her still moves beneath it all. The molten heat that sleeps in the heart of the world is her final breath, still burning, still restless. The people of old knew this, though they did not always say it aloud. They built their shrines near volcanoes and hot springs, in places where the earth steamed and growled, where the skin of the world felt thin. They left offerings, fruit, wine, silver coins, to honor what lay beneath, not to worship, but to appease, to acknowledge, because the blood of the earth does not flow without reason. Sometimes it rises, sometimes it speaks. There are stories passed down in quiet voices, not written in sacred texts, but whispered from mother to child, from elder to apprentice. Stories of nights when the ground opened and a red light spilled out, not violent, but slow and steady, like something waking from a long, deep sleep. In those stories, the people did not run. They gathered in silence. They listened. Some say the earth hummed, low and full, like the voice of something that had been here far longer than them. Others say they dreamed of a woman made of flame and salt, standing in a cavern of stars, watching them with eyes that held no judgment, only memory. The gods of the heavens, from their high places, rarely spoke of this. The blood of the earth belonged to a time before their thrones, but Marduk, in his wisdom, allowed it to remain. He knew that order, if pressed too hard, will crack. That control, if made absolute, invites rebellion. He understood that the living world must be allowed to shift, to change, to breathe, and so he left the blood of the earth untouched. It serves as a reminder that beneath the laws of gods and the dreams of mortals, something older still moves, not to destroy, to balance. For every structure needs a foundation, and every foundation rests on mystery. In times of great upheaval, when cities fall, when kings vanish, when the sun seems slow to rise, the blood of the earth rises too. It does not scream, it does not shout, it glows, it flows. It reminds that the world was born not only of sky and light, but of pressure and heat, of depth and darkness. It reminds us that we walk not on solid ground, but on the cooled skin of something vast and dreaming, and that dream still stirs, not with anger, but with memory. Chapter 22. The Serpent in the Stone. In a quiet corner of the world, far from cities and temples, there stood a single black stone, tall, smooth, and cold to the touch. Even in the height of summer, no one knew who placed it there, or when. It had no markings, no inscriptions, no signs of worship, and yet people avoided it. Animals would not graze near it. Children, when brought too close, would fall silent. Even the wind, as if aware of some unwritten law, shifted direction when it reached the stone. Legends grew around it, slowly, like moss, whispers of a presence inside, an old one, a silent one, a being that did not sleep, but waited. It was said that deep within the stone coiled a serpent, not a creature of flesh, but of force, a fragment of Tiamat herself. The old ones, those who lived before the world was shaped into lines and names, had not feared the serpent. They had understood it. They knew that the serpent was not evil. It was memory made flesh, motion sealed in stillness, a coil of energy so tightly bound that the world itself pressed around it like a lid. The stone was not a prison. It was a vessel, a weight placed in the earth to keep balance, to remind the land above that not all power should be claimed, and not all silence is empty. Over the centuries, seekers came to it, hermits, sages, madmen. Some sat before it for days without speaking. Some placed their hands upon its surface and dreamed strange dreams, visions of oceans without end, of voices that echoed in spiral form, of a breath so long and slow it stretched between the stars. None of them returned unchanged. A few returned haunted, others returned peaceful, as though a burden had been lifted they hadn't known they were carrying. But all of them agreed, the serpent in the stone was real, not alive, in the way we understand life, but present. There are stories, rare and half forgotten, of the stone glowing once, just once, on a night when the sky split with lightning, and the earth shook beneath a blood-red moon. The glow was not bright, it was subtle, a soft pulse, like the beat of a heart too old to rush. It faded before morning, but those who saw it never doubted what it meant. Something inside had stirred. Marduk, seated high in the heavens, knew of the stone. He had placed it there, not as a seal, but as an agreement. He understood that the world needed tension to survive, that without a counterbalance, even order becomes dangerous. The serpent in the stone was a tether to what had come before, a reminder that chaos was not gone, only resting, only folded into the body of the world. And should the day come when the world begins to forget its origins, when men speak only of conquest and control, when even the gods grow too certain of their order, then the serpent may shift once more, not to rise, not to punish, but to restore the curve where everything had grown too straight. Because the serpent does not seek worship, it seeks equilibrium, and beneath the skin of the world coiled in shadow and stone, it waits, not as a threat, but as the promise that nothing stays still forever. Chapter 23. The storm that had no name. It began without warning. The sky, once calm and blue, turned dark in the middle of the day. Not the gray of expected rain, or the soft build of evening clouds, but a heavy, unnatural black that spread like ink. The wind did not rise, birds did not fly, animals stood still, as if listening for something their bodies remembered, but their minds had forgotten. Then came the thunder, not loud at first, not sharp, but deep, a sound that didn't seem to come from the sky at all, but from the bones of the earth. It rolled across the land slowly, like something waking up, a murmur in stone, a pressure in the lungs, a presence. The people called it a storm, but there was no rain, no lightning, just sound and shadow, and a growing sense that something very old had turned its gaze back toward the world. It passed through cities and deserts alike, silent and massive. No crops were ruined, no houses fell, but everything changed. Children who had never spoken in dreams began to mutter strange words in their sleep. The sick, long resigned to their fate, opened their eyes and wept. Wells that had been dry for generations bubbled briefly, then fell still again. The elders said they had felt it before, long ago, in the time before stories had names, when the world was still soft around the edges and the gods walked more openly among men. It was not a curse, they said. It was a reminder, a call from something beneath the surface of the world. The priests, shaken, gathered in their temples. They burned incense, read old scrolls, sought answers in the stars, but the stars offered no guidance. They shimmered as they always had, distant and unmoved. Marduk, seated in the high place, felt it too. He rose from his throne and walked to the edge of the heavens, where the firmament meets the unknown. He looked down, past clouds, past mountain tops, past oceans, into the storm below. He knew its shape, though it had no form. He knew its name, though it had never been spoken. It was not Tiamat, and yet it was born of her. Not her return, but her echo, a pulse of the same energy that had once shaped gods and unmade silence. He did not fear it. He did not try to stop it. Instead, he listened, and in the long, low voice of the storm, he heard a truth older than his throne, that balance cannot be kept by force alone, that the world, no matter how carefully shaped, will always lean toward becoming something else. The storm moved on. By morning, the sky had cleared. The wind returned. Birds sang, cautious at first, Then with confidence, life resumed. But those who had felt the storm in their chest, in their dreams, in their silence, were not the same. They spoke less, but listened more. They touched the earth with gentler hands, and when they spoke of the storm, they did not call it a disaster, they called it a presence. And sometimes, at night, when the world was quiet and the sky heavy with stars, they would feel it again, just faintly. The pressure of memory, the breath of something vast, the storm that had no name. Chapter 24. The one who listens far from cities and temples, beyond the reach of kings and the noise of markets, there lived a man in silence. No one remembered when he had first come to the valley. Some said he was born there, others that he had walked out of the mist one morning and never left. He built no house, wore no robes, carried no staff. He spoke to no one, but people noticed him. They called him many things: the Watcher, the Quiet One, the Mad Hermit, but in time they gave him a name that stayed: the One who listens. He lived beneath a great, twisted tree, older than the village itself. Its roots cracked the stone, and its branches curved low to the ground, as if bowing to something unseen. The villagers never cut it. They never stepped too close, but once a year they left offerings at its base: honey, bread, a carved stone, a cup of wine, and they never found those offerings again. The man said nothing, but he listened. Day after day, he sat in the same place, sometimes with his hands on the ground, sometimes with his eyes closed for hours. He moved with the wind, slept with the stars, drank only from the spring that trickled nearby, where the water never ran dry. Even in the longest drought, children were drawn to him first. They dared one another to approach, to ask him questions. Most came back laughing, saying he was just a man, but some came back quiet, changed. Their parents noticed that they dreamed more vividly after that, that they spoke, sometimes of things they had never learned, of names long buried, and so, slowly, the villagers came to accept him. They let him be, until one year, a strange thing happened. The river that fed their crops stopped flowing. The rains came late, the sun hung low in the sky too long, and the winds brought nothing but dust. The priests consulted the gods, the elders prayed, nothing changed. Then a child fell sick, then another. The people grew afraid. They lit more fires, left more offerings. They fasted, they wept. Still, silence. And then one night, the one who listened stood up. He had not risen in years. He walked slowly, barefoot, to the center of the village. No one stopped him. No one spoke. He looked to the sky, then to the earth, and then for the first time anyone could remember, he spoke. She's listening. The people didn't know what he meant, but he walked to the riverbed, dry and cracked, and knelt beside it. He placed his hand on the stone and waited. All night he stayed there, and in the morning the river flowed again. It was not a flood, not a miracle, just water, clear and cool, as if it had never left. The children's fevers broke. The wind carried the smell of rain. Crops stirred in the soil, and the one who listens returned to his place beneath the tree. From then on, no one questioned him. They didn't try to understand, because some part of them knew he was not a priest, not a prophet, not a god. He was a bridge, a still point in a world that moved too fast, a reminder that not all answers are spoken, that sometimes the oldest power comes not from fire or thunder, but from silence, from presence, from listening. And somewhere beneath the ground, beneath the river, beneath the tree, something vast and patient had heard. Chapter 25. The River That Remembers. There was a river that wound through the valley like a silver thread, curving between fields and stones, as if it had chosen its path long before the land itself had formed. The people who lived along its banks called it many names, most of them forgotten now. But the river, like all old things, remembered. It remembered the feet of the first people who knelt to drink from it, hands shaking from wonder more than thirst. It remembered the offerings cast into its depths, seeds, bones, ash, quiet prayers. It remembered when the gods still walked near the earth, their reflections trembling in its current. It remembered Tiamat, not in shape or face, those had long passed, but in essence, in the way it moved without resistance, in its dual nature, peaceful and devastating, in the way it could give life or take it, and never ask forgiveness for either. The river had been carved from her sorrow. When Marduk split her body, her tears spilled across the land and gave birth to waters that would never stop moving. That grief flowed still. People had always built near it, for water, for crops, for trade. But what they didn't always know was that the river saw them, not with eyes, but with presence. It felt the weight of their stories. It listened to what they did not say. It carried their joy, their fear, their forgetting. Sometimes, when a person walked alone by the water's edge, the river would speak, not in words, but in memory, a scent, a sound, a sudden feeling that something vast and old was watching with gentle, endless patience. It was said that if you sat beside the river long enough, it would show you your past, not as it happened, but as it was felt, the version you tried to bury, the moment you couldn't name. It was also said that if your sorrow ran deep enough, the river would take it from you, but only if you gave it willingly, only if you asked with silence, not speech. The villagers knew not to disrespect it. They did not dump their waste into it. They never said the river's name aloud when angry, and when someone died, they placed a small bowl of water beside the body, for remembrance, they said, so the river could carry a piece of them forward. There was a story, too, passed down among the elders, of a time the river turned red, not with blood, but with reflection, on a night when the stars vanished, and the air grew thick with something unseen. The river rose high and ran fast, not destructive, but purposeful. The next morning, it was quiet again, but a grove of trees had appeared on the far bank, tall white-barked, whispering without wind. No one had planted them. They stood as if they had always been there. People didn't touch them, not out of fear, but out of respect. They called them the listening trees, and the river flowed on. Marduk knew of the river, though he had never set foot beside it. He had no need. The river was part of the design, yes, but it was also more than that. It was the one piece of chaos he had left untouched. A scar, yes, but also a vein, the thread of memory, wound through the bones of the world. He let it run free. He knew the river did not belong to him. It belonged to the space between gods and people, to the quiet truth that no matter how far the world moves from its origins, water remembers. And so it flowed, carrying stories, carrying time, carrying the shape of a mother's grief, softened, but never forgotten, into a future that would never fully understand her. But the river would, and it would remember. Chapter 26. The dream that spoke there are dreams that flicker and vanish as soon as we open our eyes. Scattered images, forgotten faces, sounds that fade like smoke. But some dreams stay. They arrive slowly, like fog over the sea. And when we wake, they remain lodged behind the ribs, quiet and impossible to forget. This was that kind of dream. It began with darkness, not fear, not absence, just a darkness that felt full, as if the world had not yet been shaped, and everything that might be still waited to be named. Then, a sound, not a voice, not music, but something deeper, a hum that echoed through bone and breath. The dreamer, a woman, alone and unnamed, stood in a space that wasn't a place. There were no walls, no stars, no ground beneath her feet. But she wasn't falling, she was being held, suspended. The hum grew louder, and the dream shifted. A great shape coiled through the air, vast, slow-moving, shimmering with color and shadow. It had no face, no eyes, but it saw her, not with sight, but with presence. It knew her completely, and she, without knowing how, knew it too. The dream did not use words. It didn't need to, but meaning came, not as sentences, but as understanding. You are part of me, you always have been. The woman did not ask questions. She could not. There was no fear, only stillness. A feeling like standing at the edge of the sea at night, where everything is unknown, but nothing feels dangerous. The shape circled her once, then twice. Its form was always changing, at times a dragon, at times a river, at times a storm. It was all of those things, and none of them. It pulsed with the memory of something ancient and powerful, but not cruel. The woman began to cry, not out of sorrow, but out of recognition. She didn't know why, but the tears came freely. The dream held her, the shape drew closer, and then, softly, a voice, not heard, but felt, spoke within her. You are made of me, but you are also made to forget. That is the way of the world now. But when you listen closely, in the quiet between heartbeats, in the space between waking and sleep, you will remember. She reached out, not with her hand, but with her awareness, and the dream touched her in return. A single image bloomed behind her eyes, an ocean, endless and still. Above it, a sky, without stars, and below, far below, something coiled, something sleeping, something alive. Then she woke. The room was dim. The fire had gone out. The night was cold, but she was not afraid. She sat up slowly, heart calm, mind quiet. The dream still clung to her like mist. She touched her chest and felt warmth. Her skin smelled faintly of salt water. She did not speak of it. Not that day. Not for many days. But she began to change. She listened more. She stood longer by the river. She walked alone at night, not to escape, but to be near something. And when she finally told someone of the dream, an old friend, a quiet man, who once heard the river sing, he did not laugh. He simply nodded and said, "She still speaks to those who can listen." From that day on, the woman dreamed more deeply. She painted waves, carved spirals into stone, hummed songs without melodies. She had remembered something she had never been taught, and she knew, without question, that it had been real. Because some dreams are not dreams at all. They are visitations, whispers from the place before memory, from the one who birthed the gods, and still waits in the dark water beneath the world. Chapter 27. The City That Forgot the Sky. There once was a city that had everything: tall towers carved from shining stone, streets that hummed with footsteps and laughter, markets full of color and scent, and temples whose bells rang through every corner of the day. Its people were proud, not only of their beauty and wealth, but of their cleverness. They claimed to know the stars better than the sky itself. The gods, they said, were grateful for their devotion, and perhaps once they had been. But over time, the city began to look down more than up. Their books grew heavier, their machines more precise, their maps more crowded. They charted every river, measured every breeze, named every plant and star, and in doing so they began to believe the world was theirs to shape. The sky, once a place of mystery, became only a field of data. The wind, once a voice, became only air. And the gods, they became stories, polite decorations for festivals, carved into stone more for tradition than reverence. Offerings were still made, but without heart. Words still spoken, but hollow. The people no longer listened, not to the earth beneath them, not to the wind above, and certainly not to the silence between things. At first, the gods watched with amusement. Mortals had always wandered in and out of faith. Curiosity was part of their nature. But soon the silence became a concern. The city grew too loud, too bright, too closed off from the rhythm of the world. So something shifted. Gently, subtly, the stars over the city began to fade. First the faintest ones, the little lights at the edges of the sky. Then slowly, the brighter ones, the constellations that had once guided harvests, told stories, warned of change. Gone, not all at once, not with drama, just dimmed. The people didn't notice at first. There were lanterns in the streets, fires in the hearths, glass and mirrors and polished stone. The city was never dark, but the darkness came anyway. Not in light, but in feeling. Sleep became restless, dreams more vivid. A strange weariness settled into the bones of the people, not the kind that food or rest could ease, but something deeper, a hunger of the spirit. The city's machines faltered, the crops grew thin, rain came when it wasn't expected, and refused to come when begged for. The river swelled and shrank, wild and indifferent. Still the people kept their eyes down. They worked harder, built taller walls, brighter lights, but the sky remained blank. And then one night, a child, no older than 7, wandered outside the city gates. She had never seen the stars, only read about them in books, but she had heard an old woman whisper once that if you walk far enough and wait long enough, the sky might come back. So she did. She walked until the sound of the city faded. She lay down in a field. She closed her eyes, and she waited. Hours passed. Then a breeze, soft, cold, full of scent, and when she opened her eyes the stars had returned. Not all of them, just a few, just enough. They blinked down at her, not like lights, but like watchers, like something that had been waiting to be seen. She smiled, and the sky seemed to breathe. When she returned to the city, she didn't speak of it. She just began looking up more often. Others noticed. They joined her, at first 1 or 2, then dozens, then hundreds. They stood on rooftops and hills and watched the blank sky, waiting, and slowly, the stars returned. So did the dreams. So did the wind's whisper. So did the feeling that the world was not a thing to be conquered, but a living presence to be listened to. The city did not fall. It remembered, and in remembering, it began to live again, not just with fire and stone, but with silence and sky. Chapter 28. The temple without doors, high in the hills, where the air grew thin, and the clouds moved like ghosts across the slopes. There stood a temple. It was built of pale stone that shimmered faintly in moonlight and seemed to shift in color with the time of day, gray in the morning, gold by noon, and silver as evening came. It had no gates, no steps leading up, no doors, no priests or pilgrims tended it, no fires burned within, no incense, no chants, no offerings. It had stood there longer than memory, longer than the roads that wound up toward it, longer even than the name of the mountain beneath it. And yet, it was never abandoned, because the temple was not meant to be entered. It was meant to be approached. Those who came were never called. They came because something in them, grief, longing, doubt, pulled them toward the heights. Often they came alone, after loss or silence, or a question that had followed them too long. There was no path marked, but all who sought it found the way. At the base of the hill, the air grew still. Voices felt too loud. As they climbed, something changed. Time seemed to slow. Memories surfaced. The weight of their lives, their names, the stories they told themselves, began to slip away, not forgotten, but softened. When they reached the temple, they found only a wall, high, smooth, unbroken, and yet they stayed. Some sat for an hour, some for a night, some for 3 days and more, unmoving. And in that silence, something happened. They heard nothing, saw nothing, but within them, a shift, clarity, or peace, or release. When they descended, they rarely spoke of what had occurred, not because it was forbidden, but because it was beyond language. Over time, stories grew around the temple. Some said it had been built by the gods before they gave names to things. Others claimed it was the heart of the world, that the stone was the first thing to rise from the formless sea, after Tiamat's body had been broken and shaped. The high priests in distant cities didn't include it in their maps. It was not a place of worship, they said, not sacred in the usual way, but they too avoided mocking it. There was a weight to the silence around it that not even ceremony could touch. It was said that even Marduk had stood before the temple once, long ago, after the shaping of the heavens, when the stars had begun their slow spinning. He had walked to the wall and placed his hand upon it, not to command, but to remember. Not all temples are built for gods. Some are built for grief, for truth, for what cannot be controlled or explained. The temple without doors did not answer prayers. It received them and returned nothing except understanding, a feeling that whatever question you carried was no longer yours alone, that something older had heard, and that was enough. Chapter 29. The song beneath the stones, beneath every city, every field, every forest and ocean, there is a sound, a low and endless hum that never began and will never end. It does not rise and fall. It does not ask to be heard, but it is always there. Some say it is the breath of the world. Others say it is the voice of something older. In the time before time, when the earth was still warm with the memory of Tiamat's fall, the gods moved with care. They placed mountains where her bones had settled, rivers where her tears had flowed. They laid sky upon her spine and stars across her brow, and when they were done, they listened. They heard it then, a note, not music, not even vibration, a presence in sound. It came not from above, but from below, from deep within the world, deeper than any root, older than any flame. It was not Tiamat's scream of battle, not her roar of grief, but something else, a thread of her being that had sunk so far into the ground that it became the ground. The first song, it had no words, but it carried meaning. All things that live have heard it, though few remember. Trees grow toward the light because of it. Wolves howl at the moon because of it. Oceans follow the pull of the moon, and the moon follows the ache of that song. In ancient days, there were those who could hear it more clearly. Stone cutters who sang as they worked, not because they were joyful, but because the stone sang back. Shepherds who stood alone in the night and hummed without knowing why. Mothers who rocked their children and found themselves singing songs they had never been taught. These were echoes of the first song, carried through blood and bone. Over time, the sound grew faint, not because it faded, but because the world grew loud. Cities rose, machines roared, praise became performance. The spaces where silence lived were paved over, lit with fire, buried beneath stone, and yet the song remained. There are places where it still rises, if you know how to listen. In caves so deep, no light survives. In the pause between thunder and rain, in the breath between words, when the air grows still. Some say that when a person dies, their last breath is not just air leaving the body, it is the song returning to the ground, carrying with it the shape of that life, not judged, not measured, simply returned. The gods too remember the song. Not all of them listen anymore, but Marduk does, sometimes in the vast stillness of the heavens, when the stars turn without sound, and the earth spins beneath him. He kneels and places his hand against the sky, as if it were a drum, and he hears her, not in anger, not in pain, just presence. The world is built upon her silence, her depth, her rhythm. The song is not a warning, it is not a threat, it is the truth that nothing ever truly ends. All that falls returns, all that lives hums, and beneath it all, she is still singing. Chapter 30. The fire that waits in the heart of the mountains, where the snow never melts, and the wind speaks in broken whispers. There is a place no map shows. It is not marked by temples or ruins. No traveler speaks of reaching it, but it exists. They call it the hollow flame, not because it burns, but because it waits. Deep inside the rock, beyond caverns where echoes forget their own voices, there is a chamber, vast and smooth, black as sleep, and at its center, floating just above the ground, is fire, not a torch, not a blaze, a single flame, small, still, and impossibly bright. It does not flicker, it does not spread, it does not consume, it simply is, and it has always been, long before the gods, long before Marduk shaped the world from Tiamat's broken form. The flame burned, when the stars were still unborn, and the sky was only silence. The flame was already there, waiting. Some say it is the last breath of the first chaos. Others call it the unborn eye of a god that never came to be. There are whispers, faint and forbidden, that it is what remains of Tiamat's heart, too wild, too essential, to be broken or used. That Marduk, after all his victories, could not destroy it, so he sealed it away, not as a prison, as a mercy. Even the gods do not visit the flame, not because it would harm them, but because it would show them too much. The hollow flame is not a fire of heat or light, but of memory, of essence, of origin. To stand before it is to feel everything at once, to remember being a part of something vast and formless, to recall what it felt like, before names, before shape, before fear. There are a few, very few, who have reached it, not by searching, but by surrendering. People who lost everything and stopped trying to hold on to the world, who wandered so far into silence that the mountain opened itself without sound. They do not return the same. They speak little, if at all, but their eyes carry a kind of quiet that can't be faked. They do not seek power, or peace, or even understanding. They tend gardens, they walk long paths, they sleep without dreams, and when they are asked what they saw, they simply answer, "I remembered," and that is all, because the hollow flame does not explain, it reveals, and what it reveals cannot be carried into the world, not in words, not in stories, only in presence. It is not a flame of destruction, it is the fire beneath all fires, the still point that holds the possibility of everything, and it waits, not for worship, not for fear, but for the moment, always coming, always near, when the world grows quiet enough to feel it again, when someone, somewhere, stops running, and sits down in the dark, and listens, and remembers. Chapter 31. The sky that watched, long before it was a map of stars. The sky was an eye. It did not blink. It did not sleep. It watched, not from above, but from within, a gaze woven into the fabric of the world, soft and unrelenting, like the weight of being seen when no one is there. The people of the early days understood this. They did not look to the sky only for weather or wonder. They spoke to it, quietly, as if to an old friend. They thanked it for its silence. They apologized when they had taken too much from the land, and on certain nights, when the moon was hidden and the air was still, they listened, because the sky remembers. It remembers when it was formed from Tiamat's broken back, stretched and lifted by Marduk's will. It remembers the first winds that passed through it, the first lights that were hung like lanterns across its endless dome. It remembers the weight of her body rising into the arch of eternity, and though the world below changed, kings rising, cities falling, languages born and lost, the sky remained, watching. It is not judgmental, It carries no anger, but it never forgets. The stars are its thoughts, placed in careful order, to remind the world where it came from. The sun is its breath, rising and falling. The moon, its pulse, the darkness between, its depth. Those who study the stars believe they are reading the future, but the sky is not a book. It is a memory, a living record of what has been, stitched into light and shadow. Sometimes when a person stands alone at night and looks up for longer than they meant to, something strange happens. Time seems to pause. The noise inside their mind softens, and for a moment, they feel it. The quiet pressure of awareness. The sky sees them, not as a name, or a task, or a mistake, but as a pattern, a thread, a moment in the larger shape of things. And in that moment, they understand something wordless, that they are not alone, that they have never been, not because of gods, or ancestors, or spirits, but because the sky is always there, not just above, around, within, reflecting. Even the gods speak carefully under the sky. They know it was not made for them, but from them. Marduk shaped it, yes, but only from what already was. He gave it form, but not purpose. Its purpose is older than him. It is to witness, to see, and to remember. The sky is the great mirror of creation, and when all else is lost, when the temples fall, when names fade, when the stories are no longer told, the sky will remain, not as a savior, not as a god, as a presence, watching, waiting, holding the shape of everything that ever lived. Chapter 32. The silence between gods. In the earliest age, the gods spoke often. Their voices shaped the world. Every word was a ripple, every command a storm. Marduk, in the brightness of his rise, had spoken the universe into balance. Endure whispered winds into motion. Ishtar's voice kindled passion and fury alike. Their conversations were the rhythm of existence. But time passed, and slowly they began to speak less, not because they had nothing left to say, but because the shape of the world had changed. In the beginning, silence was a void, a space to be filled. It had been Tiamat's dwelling place. Chaos was silence, and so the gods filled it with order, with language, with law. But the silence didn't die. It simply stepped back, and as the ages turned, the gods found themselves growing quieter. Marduk, now seated at the heart of the heavens, no longer roared. His voice had become stillness, not weakness, stillness. He saw more with silence than others did with speech. He watched the patterns of the stars, the weight of the seasons, the dreams of mortals, and in those things, he listened. One by one, the gods began to do the same. They had spoken creation into being. Now they listened to what it had become. They listened to the earth, which rumbled with forgotten names. They listened to the wind, which carried the cries of distant prayers. They listened to fire, which whispered of old rage and older memory. But most of all, they listened to the silence that stretched between them. It was not empty. It was full, full of what they had built and what they had lost. There were things they did not speak of. The death of Apsu, the war with Tiamat, the betrayal of Kingu. Those names were still sacred, still heavy, and the silence carried their weight better than any hymn. Even the mortals, in their way, began to reflect this shift. The great temples echoed with less noise than they once did. Rituals grew simpler. The fires burned slower. People began to look inward as much as upward. A shepherd alone at night, watching the stars. A mother holding her child in the dark, listening to its breath. A dying man, placing his hand on the earth, saying nothing. These two became prayers, unspoken, felt. The silence between the gods was not cold. It was ancient, deep, A recognition that not all truths can be shaped by words, that some truths must simply be carried through the tilt of a planet, the curve of a mountain, the quiet between heartbeats. The younger gods still asked questions, still sought answers, but the old ones, the ones shaped by the first chaos, began to let go of answers altogether. They began to exist as presence, as memory, as vibration, and Marduk, more than any, understood this. He had fought to create the structure of the world. Now his greatest act of power was to release it, not to destroy, not to abandon, but to allow space for the unexpected, for silence to move again, because silence, after all, is where creation begins. It is where the first breath gathers, where the first fire flickers, where the voice of the world older than God's speaks with no sound. And so in the high places of heaven, in the deep wells of the earth, in the edges of dreams, where the mind begins to forget its name, the gods sit in silence, not asleep, not distant, present, watching, listening, and waiting for the next story to rise. Chapter 33. The shape of chaos. Before there was form, before the sky had been lifted, or the earth laid down beneath it, there was chaos. Not the chaos of noise or violence, not confusion or disorder, as people now understand the word, but something deeper, a kind of stillness too vast for boundaries, a presence without shape, without edges, a womb of possibility. This was the chaos from which Tiamat came. She did not emerge from it. She was it, the breathless sea, the waiting, the wait, the silence before sound, before light, before will. And though Marduk had shaped her body into the foundation of the world, though the winds had carved order across her surface, that primordial chaos never vanished. It folded itself into the edges of things, into the cracks, into the spaces between. It learned to hide in form. Chaos, like water, does not resist containment. It fills the shape it's given, flows around walls, waits under pressure. It becomes whatever the world needs, until it is needed no longer, and then it shifts again. In the age of the gods, chaos was the enemy to conquer. Marduk's great act was the subduing of it, the transformation of the unformed into pattern. Stars aligned, winds had directions, time moved forward. Mortals were born into lives that could be counted, measured, named. But beneath it all, beneath the temples and calendars and divine decrees, the old chaos still breathed. It did not hate the new order. It did not seek revenge. It only waited for the moment when form would forget its source, waited for the day when names would become prisons, because every structure, no matter how beautiful, begins to crack when it forgets why it was built, and in those cracks, chaos stirs, not to destroy, but to remind. In the early days of humanity, people still lived close to the border between order and mystery. They knew not to step too deeply into the forests at night. They knew that dreams carried messages not written by their own minds. They built their houses with windows that faced the wind. They lit fires not just for warmth, but to hold back what watched from beyond the trees. They didn't fear chaos. They respected it. They left space for it in their lives. A moment of stillness before speaking, a breath taken before planting seeds, an acknowledgement, quiet and honest, that not everything could be controlled. But as knowledge grew, and with it, confidence, that space began to shrink. Walls grew higher, maps grew sharper. The world became a place to conquer, not to commune with, and chaos, patient, formless, watched. It took on new shapes, not dragons or floods, but doubt, restlessness, the strange ache in a person's chest when they wake in the middle of the night, unsure of who they are, or why they're afraid, the feeling that something is missing, not from the world but from within. That is how chaos speaks now, not through storms, but through the quiet places in the soul. It whispers in the gaps between success and satisfaction, between love and loneliness, in the silence after prayer, when no answer comes, and in those moments, it asks a simple question: do you remember me? Not Tiamat, the dragon, not the monster of myth, but me, the beginning, the sea before land, the dream before thought, the potential that existed before choice. When a person breaks, truly breaks, not in anger, but in surrender, it is often because they have touched this original presence, and when they rebuild, they carry something different in them. A softness, a spaciousness, a new shape, because chaos is not the opposite of order, it is its root. Marduk understood this, though few others did. That was why he spared the fire at the center of the world. That was why he placed the serpent in stone, not to imprison it, but to anchor it. That was why he listened more than he spoke, and why at times he chose not to act. He knew that every god who ruled without space for mystery became brittle, that even law, if made too rigid, will turn against itself, and so he allowed the shape of chaos to live on, in art, in love, in grief, in the parts of life that could never be explained, only experienced. Chaos lives in the pause before forgiveness, in the moment a child learns fear, in the second a song, never heard before, makes someone weep. It lives in the earthquake, and in the heartbeat, in the quiet rebellion of a soul, refusing to become a machine. It lives wherever something refuses to be named, and those who learn to live with it, not control it, not escape it, but live with it, carry an ancient wisdom. They become the ones who can sit in darkness without needing to light a fire, who can love without needing to possess, who can lose without needing to fill the absence. They are not louder, they are not celebrated, but they are strong in a way the world has forgotten how to name. And when the next order begins to crack, when the next tower falls, or law collapses, or belief crumbles, it is these people who hold the thread, who remember the shape of chaos, who remind the world that we were never meant to be perfect. We were meant to change, to dissolve, to return, to begin again. Chapter 34. The Woman of the Shore. Long before the names of gods were etched into stone, before the great cities rose along the rivers and crowned themselves with ziggurats and bronze, there lived a woman at the edge of the sea. Her name was never recorded, her face never carved in clay. She is not found in tablets or temples, though her story lingers in shadows, in salt, in dreams. They call her the Woman of the Shore. She did not live in a village. She did not follow rituals or write words. She lived alone, where the land met the waves, in a small hut made of driftwood and woven grass. There was no path to her door. Those who found her came by accident, or by something that felt like accident. She did not age, though years passed. Her hair was long and dark, streaked with something not quite gray, not quite silver. Her eyes were the color of wet stone, soft, deep, unreadable. She wore no jewelry, no symbols of rank. Her only companion was the wind, and the sea that came and went with each tide. To most, she was a rumor, a tale told by fishermen, on nights when the water turned thick and slow. They said she could calm the storms just by whispering to the waves, that she once stared into the eyes of a god and made him forget his name, that she could speak in languages older than breath. They said she was a spirit, a witch, a curse. Did some believe differently? Those who had seen her and returned spoke of something else, not fear, not power, but a presence, a feeling that she carried something ancient in her stillness, something vast and waiting. The woman never claimed to be a prophet. She never taught or warned or commanded, but people came to her all the same, Some arrived in grief, others in confusion. Some brought questions, others brought silence. She welcomed them with a nod and a cup of water, nothing more. And when they spoke, she listened. She listened for hours, sometimes days, never interrupting, never judging. To when the talking was done, when the words had run dry, she would walk to the shore, motion for them to follow, and together they would sit, watching the sea. She never gave advice, but people left changed, not healed, not made whole, but softened, unburdened, as if their pain had been carried out with the tide. She never asked for anything in return, but those who returned home often found their dreams quieter, their thoughts more open. They grew more patient, more present, more at peace with not knowing. The villagers who lived closest to her shore noticed something strange over the years. No matter the season, no matter the storm, her hut never washed away. Waves rose high, sometimes wild enough to take entire boats and shatter docks, but her small shelter remained untouched. Some said she had been blessed by the gods, others said she had once been a god, but the truth, as always, was more complex. She remembered the sea before it had a name, not through memory, as we understand it, not in pictures or stories, but in her body, in her breath. She carried the rhythm of something older than language. She was born from a bloodline, long forgotten, a thread woven through centuries of silence. Her ancestors had once served Tiamat, not as worshippers, but as listeners. They lived at the borders of form and formlessness. They tended fire without needing flame. They read the currents of water, not with their eyes, but their skin. When Marduk rose and shaped the world, their way of life changed. They did not resist him. They stepped aside, they scattered, they went into quiet places. They stopped writing, they stopped teaching, they let the world turn. But the thread remained. It found its way into a child born under a moonless sky, in a place where the sea sang louder than the voice of men. She grew without instruction. She did not need it. The sea spoke to her in dreams. The wind carried lessons in its hush. She learned to listen to things others called silence, and found voices there, not of gods, not of spirits, but of something deeper, of origin. She did not worship Tiamat. She did not speak her name, but she knew that in every wave, there was a breath, in every crash of surf, a memory, in every retreating tide, a truth, that the world is not built only on stone and sky, but on water, on motion, on the rhythm of what comes, and goes, and comes again. Those who sat beside her felt it, even if they could not name it. One woman arrived after the death of her son, her eyes so hollow they seemed carved from grief. She sat with the woman of the shore for 3 days, and spoke only once. When she left, she carried no answers, no new belief, but she returned to her village, and began planting trees. Years later, the orchard fed everyone. Another came, a soldier who had forgotten how to sleep. His hands shook, his eyes darted at every sound. She said nothing to him, just held out her hand, and placed it on his chest. He wept for the first time in his life. Afterward, he became a healer. Stories like these were not written. They passed by word of mouth, and even then, they changed with the telling. But always at the center remained the image of her sitting in silence, facing the sea, with something eternal in her gaze. No one knows how long she lived. Some say she still walks that shore, though the land around it has changed, though the tides now rise higher, and the stars above have shifted. Others believe she became the sea itself, that she dissolved into it one night, as the moon rose high, her body taken not by death, but by return. Then perhaps that is true, because the sea does feel different now. On some nights when the wind is still, and the world is quiet, people say they can hear a hum across the water, not loud, not close, but steady. A hum like breath, a presence. are listening, and those who hear it often smile, without knowing why, as if someone, somewhere is still sitting at the edge of the world, waiting for us to remember how to be still, how to listen, how to return. Chapter 35. The Return to the Deep. It is said that everything which rises must one day return, that rivers, no matter how far they stretch, will eventually meet the sea, that fire, no matter how fiercely it burns, leaves only smoke and ash, that even stars, bright and seemingly eternal, collapse into silence. So too must stories return to their source, and in this final telling, we return to the deep, not the deep of oceans, not the deep of mountains or hidden tombs, but the deep within, the place where memory lives before it is named, where thought has not yet become language, where the silence still carries the echo of the first breath. The gods have grown quiet. Their wars are long behind them. Their temples now stand empty or buried. Their names, once etched in gold, are spoken only by a few, and even then more as poetry than prayer. But they are not gone. They endure in different forms, in the rhythm of the tides, in the weight of dreams, in the sudden stillness that falls before something important happens. Marduk, the warrior who shaped the sky, now watches more than he commands. He understands that the world, having been set into motion, no longer needs constant control. It needs room to move, to break, to remake. He sees how humans build and forget, destroy and rebuild, again and again, and he does not judge them. He knows that they are the children of both order and chaos, and that their struggle is the world's heartbeat. In them, he sees her, Tiamat, the mother, the deep. Though her body was broken, she was never destroyed. No force in creation can truly end what has no beginning. Chaos is not death. It is the fertile soil beneath every new beginning. And across the world, signs of her presence persist, in children who see too much, in artists who dream in symbols they cannot explain, in storms that rise without warning and vanish just as suddenly, in the aching beauty of things that cannot be controlled. Birth, love, grief, music, these are her voice, not angry, not loud, just present, and every so often, someone hears her. A woman waking from a dream she can't forget, a man who stands beside the sea and feels like he's being watched, gently, a child who hums an old melody. No one taught them, they don't know her name, they don't need to. The deep calls without words, because to return is not to remember facts, it is to feel the pull toward what came before naming. And some do return, not in death, not in disappearance, but in surrender. They stop trying to control everything. They begin to listen, to the water, to the silence, to the spaces between things. They let go of the stories they were told, and begin to hear the older ones, buried beneath. And when they do, something opens. It is like a door, but not made of wood or stone. It is made of awareness, of breath, of belonging, and on the other side of it, there is no fear, only stillness, a vast, dark warmth that holds everything gently, without question. This is the deep. This is the place from which gods were born, from which light itself was kindled. It does not ask anything. It does not punish or bless. It simply holds. You may not reach it in this life. You may not reach it in 10, but you are always moving toward it. Every sorrow, every joy, every word spoken in love or rage, all of it pulls you forward, like the tide drawing back to the sea. You are not lost, you are returning. And when you arrive, whether in silence, in sleep, in surrender, you will not be alone. You will feel it, vast and endless, and know you are home. Because the deep is not a place, it is the source of all places, and the journey was never about escape. It was about remembering that you are made of the sea, and the sea never forgets.